Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the July 13th, 2020 meeting of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. My name is Catherine Halpern. I'm Chair of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. Please note that this meeting is being conducted remotely and will be broadcast live on Channel 18 and will also be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing. And I just need to read you some points regarding our remote participation meeting procedure. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A 18, and the Governor's March 23, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people who may gather in one place, this meeting of the Chatham Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. That's 1-508-945-4410. And the conference ID number is 675-899-649#. You can also join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link that is in the agenda posted on the town website. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. Also, please note that in the event that anyone inadvertently becomes muted, please press the *6 on your phone. So again, I would like to ask everyone, whether you're participating by phone or by computer through Microsoft Teams, if you are not speaking, please turn off your video and please mute your computer connection or mute your phone. That will help reduce the feedback. I'll just go through a few procedural steps that we'll have to follow. We will need to follow very formal procedure especially because of remote participation. I will begin in a minute with a roll call of all board members present. Also, if you are a non-board member, you wish to speak, you need to be recognized by the chair. And please, before you begin speaking, again, repeat your name and the last 4 digits of your phone number if you are participating by phone. And this is just so we can clearly identify all speakers. Also, after an agenda item has been discussed by the planning board, we'll request citizens or non-board members to make their comments or questions. Again, we'll only have one person speaking at the time, and I will recognize you and you'll repeat your name. And if you're connected by phone, the last 4 digits of your phone number. The planning board will be doing all votes by roll call. And also at the end of this meeting, we will close the meeting by verbal confirmation and note the time of adjournment. Also, I do need to ask if anyone is recording this meeting. It is all right to record the meeting, but the chair needs to be notified. All right, so let's go ahead. Before we go to our first agenda item, I would just like to introduce to all of you our new member of the planning board, Roger Griffith. He's not with us this evening. There's still some paperwork that needs to be completed, but we do have a new planning board member, and we'd just like to warmly welcome him to participate in the board, and we anticipate that next meeting he'll be able to join us. That being said, let's go to our first agenda item, and that's the minutes for the May 26th and June 8th meetings. let's do them separately. But before we do that, my apologies, I need to do a roll call of the board, make sure that everyone's present. Tom Gagan.
Here.
Thank you. Arthur Sprue.
Arthur Sprue here.
Thank you. Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter here.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus here.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain here.
Great. And this is Catherine Halper, and I am also here. So that being done, let's go to the first agenda item. And again, if I could ask everyone, if you're not speaking and recognized by the chair, could you mute your phone and also turn off your video or mute your computer? So let's go to the minutes for the May 26th and June 8th meetings. So let's start with May 26th. And again, I'll go through for comments from the board by roll call. I will ask if there's any comments or changes or additions to the May 26th minutes. Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan, none.
Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, no comments.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, no comments.
Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, no comments.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, no comment.
And this is Catherine. I have no comments either. So then let's vote to approve. May I have a motion to approve the May 26th minutes?
Art Sprue, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. May I have a second to that motion?
Bob Wirtschafter seconds.
Thank you. So we'll do a roll call vote. Tom Gagan.
I'll vote to accept.
Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, vote to accept.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, vote to accept.
Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, vote to accept.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, vote to accept.
And this is Catherine Halper, and I vote to accept. So let's do our June 28th minutes. Again, I'll ask for comments, amendments, changes. We'll do this by roll call. Tom Gagan, any changes?
Tom Gagan needs to recuse himself. He was not present for this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Sorry, Catherine, this is Allie. It's the June 8th meeting, not 28th.
June 8th. All right, great. Thank you. Art Sprue, any changes?
Art Sprue, no comments, no changes.
Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus, no changes.
Bob Wirtschafter?
Bob Wirtschafter, no changes.
Warren Chain?
Warren Chain, no changes.
And this is Catherine Halper, and I have no changes or additions. So again, we'll vote by roll call. And Tom, you can abstain if you were absent from the meeting. So, but I'll still include you in the vote. So Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan votes to abstain.
Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, vote to accept.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus makes the motion for the
Oh yes.
the minute.
Thank you.
He approves.
Thank you. I'm sorry. My apologies. Can I have a second? And we'll redo the vote.
Art Sprue, I second.
All right. So let's redo the vote. My apologies. Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan votes to abstain.
Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, vote to accept.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus votes to accept.
Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, accept.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, accept.
And this is Catherine Halper, and I also vote to accept. Thank you. So on to our next item on the agenda, and this is regarding a bond release for Bailey's Path. And I do have correspondence regarding that I should read to you if you'll give me one moment. So this is correspondence from the applicant. Dear members of the board, Eastward Company would like to reschedule our meeting with you to Monday, August 24th, 2020, to discuss the release of the security that was posted in 2004 for the completion of the required subdivision work at Bailey's Path. Thank you for your consideration of our request. If you should have any questions or need additional information, please let me know. And this is from Susan Ladeau at Eastwood Companies. So the applicant has requested basically to continue this matter to our August 24th, 2020 meeting. We do need to take a formal vote on that.
Bob Dubus makes a motion to accept their paperwork and continue until August 24th, I believe it was.
Yes, August 24th. Can I have a second to that motion?
Tom Gagan, second.
All right, and we'll do a roll call vote. Tom Gagan,
Tom Gagan votes to accept the extension.
Art Spru,
Art Sprue, I accept.
Bob Dubus,
Bob Dubus votes to accept.
Bob Wertschafter,
Schefter votes to accept.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, accept.
and this is Catherine Halpern. I vote to accept the request from the applicant to continue this matter to the August 24th, 2020 meeting of the Planning Board. Thank you. So the next matter on our agenda is a preliminary subdivision plan review. And this is for 79 Forest Beach Road. This is a proposed two-lot subdivision. And do I have a presenter for this matter? Please introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Thad Aldridge. I'm not sure if Jamie Norcross is on the line.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Madam Chairman, Jamie Norcross, also representing Alan and Joan Peralt.
All right, very good. Which one of you would like to speak first?
If it's okay with the board, I was just going to do a brief overview, and then Thad was going to get into more of the specifics on the application.
All right. So, Mr. Norcross, go ahead, please.
Thank you. The Peralts have an agreement to purchase this property at 79 Forest Beach Road and are set to close at the end of the month. The property has been in the Seltzer family for many, many years. The property totals about 1.5 acres and has one single family house. This house dates back to the 1920s. The Peralts spent time with Thad looking at possible subdivision options. The property is large enough for 3 lots, but that wasn't of interest to the Peralts. Their plan is to live at the property, and they want any subdivision to maintain the character in this neighborhood. Also, the creation of the 3 lots would likely require the removal of the historic house. The plan they developed with Thad creates 2 lots, both in excess of 30,000 square feet, which makes them larger than many lots in this area. The Peralt's plan is to renovate the house and working with the Historical Commission with a long-term view of eventually building a home on the vacant lot. The Peralts and Thad also spent a lot of time looking at appropriate access for the property. The property does have rights in Bobby's Lane, which is located to the east by the town tennis court. This was not seen as a preferred option for several reasons. First, there's a pretty significant grade change that goes up from Bobby's Lane to where the house would be sited on the lot. Second, there's a great deal of trees and vegetation in this area, and a lot of that would be lost if they had to include access from this location up the hill. And third, if you've been out there, it's sort of a hidden area of town where it's actually a town tennis court and a playground at the end of Bobby's Lane, which I don't think a lot of people know about. But there's a lot of privacy around that area. Again, a lot of vegetation, and they didn't want to disturb that by creating access off the end of that very quiet street, and then the tennis court and playground back there. So they turned their attention to access off of Forest Beach, which is the plan that you see before you today for the preliminary. Mr. Peralt has spoken with the immediate butters to the property on Forest Beach. They have the Kelsey family to the north and Mrs. Daly to the south. And speaking with the neighbors, the goal is to try and make the access as least impactful as possible to these neighbors and maintain the current character of the neighborhood. As a result, we are requesting several waivers that Thad will review with you. Again, the goal is to try to, while providing adequate access, to minimize it as much as possible so that the impact to the neighborhood is not significant. Just touching on one piece in terms of the report from Mr. Temple for the DPW, he references the potential for a subdivision to the east on property owned by the Donovan family, and that seemed to be a reason for several of his requests in terms of the size, the layout, and water service. And we just wanted to point out that the Donovan property does not have access over our land, and their access, if they ever were going to subdivide it, is in a different location. I would also, before I turn it over to Thad, point out that the Peralta are on the call as well this evening, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross. Thad, do you want to go ahead? This is
Hello.
Catherine.
Thad Eldridge with the Southeast. So as Jamie has mentioned, the proposal is to do the minimum necessary. We're minimizing the number of lots, 2 lots rather than 3. Approaching the Donovans to develop their property from this property was not even considered. Again, minimizing development. We're really looking at this much like many of the 2-lot subdivisions that we've seen around town in recent years. Quite often we see a panhandle with a shared driveway leading to the rear lot and to the other. This is a different configuration, but this is the way we'd like to approach it. Currently, the property enjoys a right-of-way easement over Mrs. Daly's property. That was an undefined easement, and working with her, we would like to add some definition to it that will allow us to meet requirements by the town, but at the same time, just actually add definition. There are no dimensions on that on any of the plans. The proposed roundings that we have shown on the preliminary plan, those require approval by the neighbors, or actually granting by the neighbors. We're hopeful that we can get those, but we're not sure if we can. And if we're going to build basically a shared driveway, we don't necessarily need those roundings to achieve the goals. The roadway itself, we have a 20-foot wide strip that would be a legitimate road. We do have right-of-way easement to the south, and again, negotiating with Mrs. Daly, bringing that down to a 13-foot wide width would technically give us the 33-foot required road width. We've proposed a turning T at the end in an easement. This is achieved by actually creating the road layout to only have 80 feet of frontage for the subject lot. There would be 100 feet or more at the setback line. The turning T would be within an easement, and that would give us area to produce some sort of driveway turnaround for emergency vehicles. We don't want to produce that in a formal road layout because the existing house can't meet the setback to it. And moving a house, while it's possible, there's always a danger of finding some beetle damage, some other issues. The applicant would prefer to keep it right where it is. So the access to lot 2 would be over an easement over that property heading south. That easement was designed to be wide enough to maintain the vegetated buffer with Mrs. Daly's property. The topography, while it's hard to see in that aerial photo, it's steep. There's a nice flat area on the west side of the property, and there's a nice hillside on the east side of the property. So while access from Bobby's Lane is possible, as Jamie mentioned, it would be better to access from above and develop from above. The road rights of question in here, obviously Mrs. Daly has right of way over her own property that would be extended into the proposed shared driveway or roadway, so that we minimize the curb cuts out on Forest Beach Road. The road construction itself is of interest. I mean, we're talking South Chatham, we're talking a number of roads that are unpaved, dirt, stone, shell. And we're looking to discuss with the planning board the possibility of minimizing the road construction to really fit in with the neighborhood. Mr. Peralta is not necessarily against paving the road, but there have been a number of discussions with neighbors, and they want to maintain that old Cape Cod charm. Mr. Peralt's certainly not adverse to that. That's why we want to really discuss it with you folks to find out what can we do here to really make this work for everybody. Utility-wise, there's little need to install full utilities for the subdivision. We're talking 2 house lots. There's a fire hydrant across the street. New water services can be provided. There's a gas main in Forest Beach Road. 2 services can be provided from that. There's currently an overhead utility line going to a utility pole directly opposite Mrs. Daly's house, and the proposal would be to put that underground. Again, having 2 services leading from that to the subject properties. And with that, I can turn it over to Mr. Peralt.
This is Catherine Halpern. Mr. Peralta, are you on the call?
I am, thank you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, I am. Thank you. I sent a letter that my wife Joan and I signed this morning to Ali Sabatino that I think states kind of some of our position. And I took the liberty of looking up the Donovan deed to in fact confirm that there was no right across to the 20 feet that we have. That the only place we touch the Donovan property is in that lower left-hand corner. I guess that would be the southwest corner, and it only touches 20 feet. But I think the right-of-way would have to be wider, and that property actually does have access, as I mentioned in my letter, to Circle Drive, and it has adequate width. It has 38 to 40 feet of width, which would exceed the 33 feet needed. So I just kind of made the point that, as Thad and Jamie mentioned, we are looking to have the least disruption in this neighborhood as we can. And I think, single water lines and gas and electric lines to satisfy the property. The existing house has gas, water, and electric already. So we're not really burdening this site too much, and we would run all the utilities underground. And as I stated in the letter, our intent is we're actually moving from South Harwich to this location at the end of the month, and would be renovating that. And we tentatively are prepared to go before the Historic Commission on August 18th, their next meeting, to basically just clean up the exterior. There's a few things that were added to it, an exterior stainless steel venting pipe that I'm going to do a direct vent heating system that will eliminate that on the west elevation. And we're going to remove a doghouse kind of dormer that goes, or doghouse that goes into the basement that's fairly ugly. So our intent is really to kind of clean up the building if we can, and kind of go more back to what it was intentionally, and to have a consistent visual from the outside. I would say that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peralt. This is Catherine again. So before we proceed, I would like to read into the record, just read the letter from Mr. Temple regarding this property. We should cover that, and then we'll go into the board discussion and questions. So this is from Tom Temple, DPW Director, and regarding 79 Forest Beach Road. And he says, on behalf of the department, I reviewed the aforementioned subdivision and offer the following comments or recommendations shown below. While the majority of the items listed below may not be typically seen at the preliminary subdivision submission phase, these items will ultimately need to be addressed during the definitive subdivision submission phase and/or site plan review, special permit application and/or construction as applicable. I thought they should be mentioned, discussed, where this could impact future development to adjacent properties to this subdivision. Preliminary subdivision plan. 1, plan should be stamped by Commonwealth of Massachusetts registered professional engineer and professional land surveyor. 2, label show zoning district. 3, provide zoning requirement table, required versus provided table, including the following: lot size, lot frontage, side yard setback, front yard setback, rear yard setback. 4, provide, show more existing condition and utilities within the town's right-of-way layout, Forest Beach Road, a minimum of 200 feet in each direction from the proposed subdivision on base map. 5, lot number 1 at 79 Forest Beach Road's mailing address should change to reflect the new proposed street name, as well as lot number 2 should also reflect the new street name address. A street sign should be shown on the subdivision plan, ultimately being erected at the intersection, showing the new proposed road name and also labeled on the plan, also identifying the proposed right-of-way layout width on the land plan. 6, I recommend that a 33-foot right-of-way layout be maintained for this subdivision. Given the number of ultimately installed as part of this subdivision, as well as the future sewer line that will need to be installed when sewer is brought to this area, there is a potential for 2 or more additional lots that could be developed, Donovan property, northeast of this subdivision at the end of this road. I would recommend the following. 6A, the area depicted on the grading plan as proposed road drainage in this area, which is shown within the proposed right-of-way layout, be located on Lot 1 in a defined new drainage easement as part of this subdivision. Subpoint 1, this will eliminate any utility conflicts in the future when and if the Donovan property is developed and utility improvements need to be extended for future roadway expansion. And B, an 18-foot wide paved roadway be required to provide two-way traffic, which should accommodate vehicular traffic to safely pass in opposite directions with appropriate shoulder areas each side of the roadway. This should also provide adequate movement for emergency response vehicles, that is ambulance, etc., should they be called to this area. Point 7, provide a typical cross section for the roadway showing the location of each of the utilities proposed for the subdivision with the proper horizontal separation required for each. Keeping in mind sewer will also need to be installed within the proposed right-of-way layout in the future. Point 8, label dimension widths of roadway on the plan. Point 9, with respect to the developer's request to installing 2 water services and meter pits for the proposed 2 lots. The department does not agree with this request. Given the distances involved for the 2 lots in question, the proposed meter pits would typically be located near Forest Beach Road, approximately 5 feet from the curb stop for each service. However, with the potential development of the property located at the end of the proposed road, which contains approximately 196,000 square feet, 2.37 acres parcel, I would recommend the following. Point 9A, the developer be responsible for the installation of an 8-inch water main servicing the new subdivision to be located within the right-of-way on the north side of the roadway. With a line gate, not eliminate the shutdown of water service to the existing houses main and potential loss of water should the tract of land to the northeast be developed, and 1 full length of pipe capped for future connection to be located after the required hydrant. B, install 2 1-inch water services to each lot, tapped prior to the end line before the hydrant connection. C, 3-way gate be installed at the intersection of Forest Beach Road and the proposed road. Point D, hydrant located at the end of the line for flushing purposes. Point 10, provide house numbers on existing condition plan. Point 11, road on existing condition plan. One moment, I just need to scroll down here. Point 12, all proposed information should be depicted in bold and existing information in grayscale. 13, label show zoning district, provide zoning requirement table, require versus provided table, including the following: lot size, lot frontage, side yard setback, front yard setback, rear yard setback. Point 14. Waivers sought by the developer should be clearly noted on the plan for all to see. I would suggest that the engineer provide a table with a list of waivers being requested, providing 3 columns, a place for description, and 2 columns for approved and denied waiver request, clearly shown on the definitive subdivision land plans to reflect the vote made by the planning board prior to the plan being recorded in the Barnstable Registry of Deeds, as shown in the example below. Again, I just need to scroll down. So he gives an example: description, waiver requested, approved, denied. Point 15, and the waivers that Mr. Temple is noting as examples are the 33 right-of-way layout, the proposed tree planting, 18-foot minimum roadway pavement, buffer strip, roundings, and 18-inch berm. So point 15, the proposed T turnaround should be paved to provide safe turnaround for emergency response vehicles and/or plowing operations being performed by the developer. Point 15A, show proposed snow storage areas for the T roadway in relation to proposed driveways, utilities, and proposed tree plantings. 15B, provide and show proposed grading in the T roadway layout area to make sure surface water drainage is directed to proposed catch basin and drainage system. Point 16, the proposed subdivision appears to be adjacent to land court parcels. While I understand that the necessary certifications are not required at the preliminary submission phase, and an actual survey will need to be performed in accordance with land court instruction, I would like to see all, does he mean monumentation, existing and proposed, along with the bearings and distances in line with same. Point 17, show proposed contours, house location, driveway locations, proposed retaining walls where applicable, sub-drains, perimeter drains to dry wells, and setback dimensions from property lines. Show proposed monumentation for drainage easements. Point 18, show proposed tree location on plan. Provide tree table of size, type for necessary approval from tree warden. Point 19, subsurface conditions location. Provide results of test made to ascertain subsurface soil, rock, groundwater conditions, depth to groundwater, soil percolation, etc. Point 20, show existing utility poles location and proposed underground utilities with necessary hand-hole junction boxes at changes in direction as necessary on plan. Point 21, depict existing gas main, if it exists, within Forest Beach Road right-of-way layout. If gas main is located within 100 feet of the subdivision, the developer should provide service to this subdivision. Label and show proposed gas main on plans and proposed service location. Point 22, show electric transformer if required for subdivision and any handhole locations. One moment, please. I think that's the end. Is that correct, Ally? All right, that's the end of Mr. Temple's correspondence. We do also have some correspondence from the Board of Health that I would like to read to you. Thank you. So, dear Mr. Peralt, on June 6, 2020, at the hearing for the above referenced property, which is 79 Forest Beach Road, the Board of Health voted to recommend for approval the preliminary subdivision plans dated June 25th, 2020, received by this office June 30th, prepared by ESE LLC. If you have any further questions or comments, please contact me at this office Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And this is from Judith Giorgio, of the chairman of for the town of Chatham. So those correspondence being read, I do want to go to the board members now, and we'll do this again by roll call. Ask you if you have comments, discussion points, or questions for the applicant.
I'm sorry, Catherine, this is Allie. Before you go on, there's just one correspondence from the applicant that I believe they wanted you to read as well.
All right, thank you, Allie. My apologies. So this is from Alan Perrault, Mr. and Mrs. Perrault. Dear Ms. Zabatino, in advance of today's planning board preliminary subdivision for the above referenced property, we'd like to point out to you that, and the board, that we are proposing this 2-lot subdivision as future residents of this South Chatham property. We are selling our current South Harwich home on July 31st and moving to 79 Forest Beach Road that same day. As you may be aware, the existing house is considered contributing to the proposed South Chatham Historic District, and a Form B, copy attached, was prepared for this building in September 2016. For these reasons, along with respecting the setting and historic nature of the existing home and the concerns for our immediate neighbors, the Kelseys, at 55 Forest Beach Road, and the Dailies at 83 Forest Beach Road, we are hoping that the board will agree with the proposed plans by Thad Eldridge to make the road and access into this parcel as unobtrusive as possible. After renovating the existing home, we hope to design and construct a new home on the proposed 40,000 plus or minus square foot lot proposed in this subdivision. Regarding the DPW's director's comments concerning accounting for future development of a neighboring parcel, we respectfully request that the board not impose the burden on this simple 2-lot subdivision. Not impose that burden on this simple 2-lot subdivision. The parcels only meet for a length of 20 feet, and that parcel has no rights to pass over our property, nor that of our immediate neighbors. It does have a deeded right-of-way with adequate width over nearby Beldings Way and Circle Drive, as noted in the attached Barnstable County deed and plan. Thank you for your consideration of the points raised in this letter, and this is from Alan and Joan Perrault, who are the owners. Thank you. So that being done,
If I may, before you move on, could I request that you read the email that I sent to Ali Sabatino last Friday at 6:45 p.m.?
Yes, and this was Thad Eldridge speaking.
Yes, sorry, Thad Eldridge.
Catherine, I don't believe that you have it. I can read it though, if you just give me 1 second.
All right, thank you, Allie.
If you'd like, Ali, I could read it in.
Oh, I got it, Thad, sorry. All right. Hello, Allie. I'm overwhelmed by Mr. Temple's review of the preliminary subdivision plan. I would appreciate it if you could remind the planning board of the requirements of a preliminary subdivision plan. For your convenience, I have copied the same here. 3. Contents. A preliminary plan, which may be drawn in pencil, shall be at a convenient scale and shall include the following data. 1. Subdivision name boundaries, North Point, date scale, legend, and title preliminary plan. 2. Name of owner of record and the engineer or surveyor. 3. Names of all abutters as determined from the most recent tax list. 4. Existing and proposed lines of streets, ways, easements, and any public or common areas within the subdivision in a general manner. 5. Proposed systems of drainage, including adjacent natural waterways in a general manner. 6, approximate boundary lines of proposed lots with approximate areas and dimensions. 7, names, approximate location, area, and dimensions of existing nearby streets, ways, easements, and public areas. 8, topography of the land in a general manner. And 9, key sketch map showing the location of the proposed subdivision in the town. Could you provide me with the pertinent regulations requiring utility locations with 200 feet of a property on a town road? Could you provide me with the pertinent regulations requiring site development plans within a proposed subdivision? We can review some of the items at the hearing on Monday. However, I will not be providing a plan including the pertinent request in this report until a definitive subdivision plan. Have a good weekend, Thad.
This is Catherine Halpern. Thank you, Ally. So just before we move to board questions and discussion, Ally, I'll just double check with you. Is there any further correspondence?
Well, 5 minutes.
This is Ally. There is no further correspondence.
Thank you, Ally. So let's go to board discussion, comments, questions for the applicant. And again, we'll do this in the roll call matter. So Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan, I do have some comments and questions, Catherine.
Yes, please go ahead.
My first question would be to ask permission to speak with Alan Peralt.
Yes, you can ask questions of the applicant. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Alan, you have bothered to take the time to interview and spend some considerable time with the abutters.
That's correct, sir.
And my understanding from having talked to actually both abutters, one briefly and one for about an hour, they seem to be very much in concert with what you're trying to accomplish here.
That is correct, sir.
What you're proposing, from what I viewed, seems to be to maintain a very Cape Codish, I know there may not be such a term, but a Cape Codish type of environment there. What is there now very much resembles what Cape Cod must have been like in the 20s and 30s. One of the indications that I believe you may have made to someone somewhere I read is that in order to bring some of the utilities in, that there may be some trees that would have to be removed, but you are willing to replace those trees in the future after those utilities been put in place.
That is correct. And I believe we'll need to do some work with Mrs. Daly. I hope we can restore some of her front yard in this process. She's actually been had the access to this property instead of over the 20 feet that the property has to Forest Beach. It has gone across that easement for the entire time she's owned it. So the idea is to make this less burdensome for her. And the Kelseys have been very cooperative through the whole process, and largely would like to accommodate the Dalys, who they feel are the most impacted by the current situation.
Well, I took the time today to question this as an intelligence test for this board member to actually find the place. It seems I was on a lot of roads that were in the area, and none of them were very much different from the other. They all look like dirt roads to me, but it's very quaint. And I had done personally a subdivision of this size elsewhere in the state, and much to my surprise and being very happy, is that we were able to reduce the required roadside down to the paved area, and I'm not recommending this be paved, to about 12 to 14 feet for a two-lot subdivision. As a board member, I would be very supportive of not having to pave this. I think that would take away from the character of what you're trying to replicate here, and two, to make that roadway as practical in terms of small width. Again, I'm not telling you what it should be, but certainly 12 to 14 feet seems to be adequate. It's a very nice treed area in the back, and going along with that, Thad Ellis has been able to point out that a lot of what has been requested, and I read it multiple times by Tom Templeton, and no aspersions cast on Tom, is that there's a lot of overkill that may ruin, in fact, the image of what you're trying to create in this area. So if it is in fact true, it could be proven that there is no access to the Donovan property to the rear, I think this becomes a much simpler application for the two-lot subdivision, along with making that entranceway A, noticeable to the rest of the world with a sign would be nice, and B, improving the ability to cross over that road in a graded gravel area, I think would be very applicable for this area. So I'm very much in support of what I see in the preliminary plan. Thank you.
This is Catherine. Thank you, Tom. Are you completed with your comments and questions?
Yes, Catherine, Tom Gagan, I am. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. So we'll move to Art Sprue. Comments, questions, discussion, questions for the applicant, Art Sprue.
I guess I'll just make comments. Again, this is a preliminary, and I think just to consider Tom Temple's points, he's definitely referring to things that need to be considered when you're doing a definitive plan. So all those things certainly are relevant and should be looked at it to that perspective. I guess I went out there and I drove the property. I saw the access from both points. I looked at the access to the Donovan property, so I got a good feel for it. One of the things that I noted is if you are going to put an access in through the 20-foot access piece, there's a significant number of trees there. They're all going to need to come down practically, depending upon where the road's going to be. Our regulations call for the roadway to be in the center, so that would be in the center of a 33-foot, whatever set layout that is, whether it's the 20 and 13-foot easement or if it's a 33-foot right-of-way. I can understand why Tom is looking for a 33-foot right-of-way, because he's got future utilities to say he has to deal with as a DPW. If sewer's going to come in throughout the entire town, we're going to need sufficient access and width to put that in. There's separations that need to happen between water mains versus sewers. So I can understand why Tom is looking for something that wide. I disagree with Tom on the standpoint of the width of the roadway. The width of the roadway should be 18 feet. I'm not opposed to having a different type of a surface rather than a paved surface, but it needs to be adequate width for emergency vehicles to get in and be able to turn around and go back out again. I don't see this as being just servicing the two homes in here. I still see that unless somebody tells me not, that there could be access to the Donovan property. I went out there and took a look at the access off of the other roadways for the Donovan property, and they're narrow. They're like 18-foot access right-of-ways, private ways, and circle is 33. But again, to get to the access is probably not much different than accessing the lot 2 off of Betty's Lane. It's very similar situation there. A lot 2 is essentially all wooded, whether you have the access off of Betty's Lane or if you have a roadway which is put in here, whatever width it is, you're still going to be removing significant number of trees on the lot just to get access to it, drive, the house, septic system, and that. So whether it comes off of Betty's or Forest Beach, there's still going to be significant removal on the site. and that is what it is. I'm not suggesting that that shouldn't happen. The other thing is if you're putting in this access here for the lot off of Forest Beach, then the let's see, 80. I'm not sure the owner's on 83 Forest Beach. They are essentially going to have a roadway or a drive of some sort around two sides of the property. So that's, going to be much more burdensome on them. Our regulations do talk about putting a buffer strip in. Certainly, if we're going to be taking down that many trees in order to get this access road in here for these properties, there's going to have to be significant tree replacement because these are not small trees that are on that strip there. They're trees that are anywhere from 6 to 12 inches in diameter, and that's significant. I think the utilities are going to be a big challenge. When you start putting all these underground utilities in, you're talking about electric underground to service most of these. You got telecom that's going to be underground servicing these. You got a gas line underground. You got sewer that's going to be there, water main. You need a sufficient right-of-way for that purpose. So I think there has to be serious consideration associated with that. One of the things, and I think Allie brought this up, was in our general section of our rules and regs of access. I mean, we need to consider access to not just this property, but also future properties. I think I'd like to hear from what's going to happen with the Donovan property. Are they okay with being cut off from this way as a more logical way to access their property? Because there isn't really as good of access off of Circle Road and the narrow 18-foot wide right-of-way that connects to Bayview. I think Tom's point on storm drainage makes sense. A lot of times what we do is we asked for the storm drainage not to be put on the road, because if there has to be utilities or some adjustments in the future and you got a big infiltrating basin there, it's in the way of everything. And then all of a sudden you got a lot of challenges of trying to deal with underground. So I think that should be something that should be seriously looked into. I think that's it for right now, Catherine. I think there's a lot of questions that I'm seeing here on this. I'm not sure how they should all be addressed in that, but I'm not looking at this in the same perspective as what the applicant is. I think we have to take a look at it from a much more broader view on this.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Arthur. This is Catherine speaking again. So again, let's just keep going. Bob Dubus, do you have comments or questions, points for discussion, questions for the applicant?
I have a question for Thad.
Yes.
I'm going to say that the dailies are going to be using the road that they put in. I believe they use the driveway that's there. So in reality, there's 3 people that are going to use this road on this right of way. So I kind of think that I would like to see the road in front of the dailies at least passable by 2 cars. And I believe that the turnaround should be adequate for the ambulance and/or a small rescue vehicle to be in the T. It's not really a T. It's more like a turnout.
An L.
And the water, as long as I have no problem with the water services being 2 water services, as long as there's no connection to the property, I guess it's to the east of there,
Mm-hmm.
the undeveloped property, the Donovan property. I don't believe, unless the water company has a future tie-in to make it go through there, because they like loops. But if there's going to be no tie-in to the Donovan property, I see 2 services is all right. And I also believe that the sewer line should be put in at the same time. If the paved road, I understand nobody wants a paved road, but it is on a downhill slope, which is going to cause some rutting with traffic going in and out of there with 2 or 3 houses. The only alternative that I can see is to pave it and then inlay it with stone if they wanted to make it look natural, or Cape Codish or shells or something like that. And then I would assume it's going to be privately owned, so it's up to them to snow plow it and maintain it. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. This is Catherine. Thank you, Bob Dubus. So Bob Wertschafter, comments, discussion points, questions for the.
Catherine, I have nothing else to add to all those great comments.
All right. Thank you, Bob. And Warren Chain, comments, discussion points, questions for the applicant.
Yes, this is Warren. First, I pretty much go along with the comments already made, so I won't go over that ground again. I would ask Tad if I could, just to confirm my understanding when I saw the proposed plan, and that is that there is no legal right from the Donovan property to cross over to Forest Beach over the applicant's land, is there?
That is correct.
Okay. I didn't see the notice about the Donovan property in time for me to go do some homework, but I'm taking it from Art's comments, I guess it was, that there's only about an 18-foot access to another road to the north of the Donovan property. Is that right?
It's to the east of the Donovan property. I reviewed that property years ago, and their potential access points would be to gain rights over this strip, which they don't have, to gain rights over Bobby's Way and Judy and Gentian Way, which they don't have, and their point of access is over Belding Way and Circle Drive, which are off to the east, and it's uncomfortable to get from those roads into their lot. They've owned this for many years, and it's potentially a reason why they haven't developed it yet, because there's no good solution.
Mm-hmm.
To go on with the road coming from this direction, if they were the ones who had purchased this specifically to gain the access, is about a 20-foot drop from the current house down to their property. So the grade to get in there is difficult. That's a real challenge to meet our 7% slope.
Yes, I did. I walked the property today, and there is quite a slope there. Before my next comment, let me ask Ally to comment on whether or not any of the parties that have been discussed here, Daley's and the Murphys, the Donovans, and so on, were they all in receipt of notices of this public hearing?
So Warren, this technically isn't a public hearing. This is just the preliminary review of the subdivision plan. The next step will be submission of the definitive plan, which will require a public hearing, and all of the abutters will be notified.
Okay, so that really confirms what I thought was the case. That at the moment we have no way to know whether the Donovans might be planning to develop that property or not, or whether they feel they could do it from the other access, or whether they feel that they would need to try and make their peace with the applicant right now to be able to ensure access in the future. That would be down the road. But clearly, my comment would be site plan, that there ought to be some input or dialogue with the Donovans, because if in fact the ultimate answer for them would be to make their peace with the applicants here. The time to do that would be before, not after the definitive plan is proposed, because it would require some of the additional infrastructure in terms of road width, turnaround, paving services, et cetera, that have been mentioned in the DPW comments. So that would be a comment. With respect to all of the landscaping, it is a beautifully treed area that has been reasonably well maintained, so you can actually walk through the woods. It's quite lovely. And many of those trees, I would also say, would need to come out on the proposed driveway or access to the site. So I would suggest that the applicant certainly propose or take heed of the buffer strip requirements and or merely a landscape plan to try and maintain or restore some of the woodland which would have to disappear merely to get access as proposed, but then also to develop lot number 2. I don't think I have anything that wasn't already mentioned in one form or another, so that would be all my comments.
Okay, this is Catherine speaking again. Thank you, Warren. So I have a couple of comments. I just wanted to, I think the board is aware of this and the public is aware of this, but I just want to, and Tom Temple clearly stated it in his letter, that a lot of the things that he's requiring are things that really are not considered until the definitive subdivision plan and even subsequent to that. And nevertheless, we are in a position now where we're looking at a preliminary subdivision plan, and our vote will be to either approve the plan, we can improve it, we can also approve the plan with modifications or conditions, or we do have certain options to not approve the preliminary plan. So I would just want to remind the board in that regard that although it's a preliminary plan and certain things are not required at this point, it's still a situation where we're approving or approving with conditions or not approving something that will come to us as a definitive plan. And I think in that sense, we do need to take certain things into account. And I'm hearing from your comments that in your thinking, at least to what I'm hearing, that we are taking that into account. I think we need to take these considerations into account, what ultimately will be developed here. Is there enough width for the underground utilities in the right-of-way and so on? And although, of course, I would want to agree with the idea to have a plan that presents the least impact as possible, the fact of the matter is we also have to be sure that the plan, first of all, meets our subdivision rules and regulations, that it will meet the needs of the use of the site for the new subdivision, that it will be practical, which includes the considerations that we've been discussing, such as utilities and so on, and that it will meet all of the safety standards. That's our responsibility as a public board. We also have discussed quite at length on this board that our subdivision rules and regulations as they stand are very light, that we would like to make them more rigorous. So we just need to consider all those factors here. Maybe the best way to continue, and we will take public comment, but as I understand it, and Ali again has given us a very thorough summary in her staff report, that there are certain waivers being requested. And I think we need to specifically consider those waivers and whether or not, as a board, we feel completely confident to grant those waivers. If we don't feel completely confident granting those waivers, one course of action that we could do is to approve the preliminary subdivision plan with modifications or with conditions, and spell out those conditions, which may entail not approving all the waivers, for example. So I'm actually, Thad, I would like you to summarize very precisely the waivers that are being requested here.
Sure.
Great.
There's a possibility of the request of the roundings.
Okay.
We do not have easements in hand for either rounding. The roadway itself would be made of fee interest and easement, which shouldn't require a waiver. It does provide the requisite width. The utilities and the road construction are the big ones. We're
The right
looking
of-
for the utilities and road construction are the big waivers sought.
Right.
Going with services rather than a full main, and going with the least impact upon the neighborhood in line with the neighbor's requests.
All right. And you are requesting, let's see, but you're requesting a reduction in the 33-foot right-of-way, correct?
So we currently have a right-of-way that exists over Mrs. Daly's driveway that was never defined. It was actually so old, it was for passage and repassage of carriages. It shows up on 2 land court plans, which incidentally, this property is registered, or the bulk of the property is registered land and will require a full land court survey. So that right-of-way was never defined. It scales at 16.5 feet, which is fairly typical for that time. We're now looking at reducing that down to 13 feet to make up the difference to be able to provide a 33-foot wide layout, while simultaneously trying to minimize the impacts on the neighbors by not necessarily constructing it as if it were a 33-foot wide road. Obviously, with the easement and the fee interest 20 strip, we have ample room for water, underground utilities, gas, and a sewer line. And we would also like to consider sewering down to Bobby's Lane. And there's very little prohibiting us from providing an easement over Lot 2 for the benefit of Lot 1 to allow the sewer pipe to drain by gravity to Bobby's Lane at that time.
Okay, thank you, Thad. So now I would like to ask if there are, before we continue with the board discussion and vote, I would like to ask if there are any members of the public who are listening to this broadcast who would like to make comments and be recognized. So I don't hear anyone. So
Catherine, sorry, this
yes,
is Allie.
Allie.
I just wanted to say, I believe that they'll also need a waiver from the buffer strip requirement as well.
Yes.
So I just wanted to put that on the planning board's radar.
Yeah, I do want to just, for lack of a better word, nail this down, because I think that was one point in Tom Temple's report about a clear description of exactly what waivers are being requested, because otherwise the board really can't vote on whether or not we're willing to grant those waivers. But it's obviously the roundings, it's the buffer strip. Is there a waiver being requested for clearing trees? we've been discussing that there's going to be a significant amount of clearing that needs to be done. Ally,
Chairman,
yes, Bob, do this.
just for information that whether you put in a 8-inch main or two, I would say 1.5 or 2-inch water services, the impact on the land is the same. They both go down 5 feet. One's a bigger pipe, but the trench is pretty much the same thing. So the destruction is almost the same for either water type you go with.
Okay.
And let me comment on the sewer that we're not so sure that Bobby's Lane is going to have a pumping station. That's at the very bottom, and this house is higher. That might be a pressured line that you have to have a pump for, which will be a lot longer than to pump it off.
Okay, thank you, Bob, do this. So essentially, I'm trying to summarize the waivers are the roundings, the 33-foot right-of-way, the buffer, the turning T. We haven't really discussed that, but the regulations allow for a turning T instead of a cul-de-sac in the instance of unusual topography or other local conditions. I believe when discussing with Ally that the other conditions are the placement of the historic house, that its placement is such that a cul-de-sac would not fit there. So we could understand that those are the local conditions regarding the turning T. So again, the waivers that are being requested are the roundings, the 33-foot right-of-way, excuse me, the buffer strip. Ally, how else can we summarize the waivers?
Yeah, so you had asked before about the trees. So in our rules and regulations, it says, to the fullest extent possible, existing trees shall be preserved by the developer. Special consideration shall be given to the layout of the lots and position of dwellings. So it doesn't say it's a requirement to keep trees on site, but I know if you are going to put a road, and I just need to find that section, you are required, I believe, to place trees along the roadway. But I think that the best course of action going forward for the board, and if the applicant and the applicant's agents disagree, you're more than welcome to let me know. But if the planning board can give a sense to the applicant if they would be willing to allow a smaller right-of-way with the infrastructure not to the level that's required in our rules and regulations, and then potentially as a condition of approval, if the board wants to approve, that they would specifically state exactly what waivers they are proposing to the board with that definitive subdivision plan submission.
And all right, I think that's a good plan, although even at the preliminary level, wouldn't it be wise to let the applicant know if the board is inclined to grant those waivers or not? So we need to know them now, in a sense, is what is the point I'm making.
And if I may, Thad Eldridge here, with a preliminary plan, there are no binding commitments from either of us, which is why we've come in here more for a discussion than adding specificity. We've heard comments from the board that 12 to 14 foot of width would be adequate for the traveled surface. We've also heard that 18 foot is necessary. We've seen other roads with narrower roadway but turnouts. We'd be very, very keen on minimizing this roadway, which is really a shared driveway. While there are 3 properties that would be sharing this driveway, we're talking on average 18 vehicle trips a day, which is not a highly intensive use.
Okay, thank you, Thad. So I think,
Catherine,
yes.
this is Art. Can I just
Yes.
ask for one clarification?
Yes, please go ahead.
Some of these requests for waivers, we may not be able to make a very informed decision on as a board. For example, the roundings, we see nothing from a plan view of what the roadway width would be, how it would lay out, how it would tie into Forest Beach Road. We don't see any information other than, on a graphic of some utilities, but not necessarily the complete comprehensive component of all the utilities there. It would be difficult to actually make a determination at this point with the preliminary. I'm somewhat agreeing with Thad on that we're not necessarily making a definitive statement at this point, but there certainly is issues that will have to be addressed as part of the definitive subdivision once we see more information. But right now, I don't have an awful lot of information to be granting much of any of these waivers, including the buffer strip. So I'm sort of laying back and saying, well, we can approve the plan, but you have all of these issues that are going to come up in the definitive, and they're unresolved at this point.
Yes, thank you, Arthur. I would tend to agree with that. The issues are unresolved. This is Catherine Halpern speaking, sorry. The issues are unresolved. I think the sense I'm getting from the board is, but we should, go to formal vote. But there is concern about these issues. I don't think it's a given that if waivers are requested that they would be granted. I think we do need more information to consider it carefully. Nevertheless, we're in the situation this evening where we need to consider it as it is, but I would also want to offer the applicant enough information from the board as to how to put it, what our decisions would be when more information is received. So I'm trying to formulate in my mind, how can we do that tonight? How can we structure the vote? If we structure the vote to approve with modifications, I think it's, then we would want to spell out the conditions or modifications. And I think what Arthur is saying is that in some sense, we don't even have enough information to do that. So, Allie, I'm going to ask.
Mrs. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
This is Jamie Norcross again. I think Allie's suggestion makes a lot of sense in terms of we understand that we're going to have to provide more information for the board to make a decision on these. Again, I think we've gotten a good flavor from each of the members in terms of feedback, which we're going to go back and work on. So I don't think we were expecting, formal decisions from the group today in terms of all these waivers. But again, we've gotten, I think, some good color on what we can work on before we come back with the definitive.
All right. So we could structure the vote. I don't see it as an approval with no conditions. I see that the board is bringing up some conditions. Even it could be the condition that at this point, the board is not considering the waivers. Because I think most board members seem to be leaning that way. But again, I don't want to speak for the board till we take a formal vote. Allie, could I ask for your help how we might word the motion?
So it really depends on if you'd like to approve with modifications, and then the modifications would be the conditions that the board has agreed upon. And if it's, they agreed upon that you'd like to see in very detailed list of what the waivers will be, then that would be the, modification that they'd have to make to the plan to include that. Is that what you were looking for, or was that something different?
No, I think something like that. I just feel that I'm agreeing with Arthur. I don't think we even have enough information to either to vote that we would approve the waivers or we don't approve the waivers. But yet I don't want to see the applicant being put in a position where they come to us with a number of waivers that may ultimately not get approved by the board, at the definitive. So I'm just trying to provide as much information to the applicant as possible. also.
So
Yeah.
Catherine, oh, sorry.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Dubus.
Bob Dubus here. You know, if we had a list that we could see of the waivers that the applicant wanted, and believe it or not, if we had a very rough staking of the road and layout where we could see where the shoulders were going to be, where the turnouts were going to be, to give us some kind of idea on an on-site inspection of exactly what they're trying to give to us with the neighbor's driveway, the proposed driveway, the just an X or something, that drainage is going here, water and gas is going here. We really have nothing but a pencil drawing basically that we're looking at. And nobody knows how many trees are going to be in the way, what's going to be for the turnaround, what's going to be here, what's going to be there. So I really cannot approve this as it is, whether you waivers or no waivers. I'm not going to vote for anything until we get more of an idea of what's going on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Even at the preliminary stage. I just want to verify this is Catherine.
Yes, I know it's a preliminary thing, but the next time they come in here, they're going to have a detailed plan, and we have no idea of what the plan's going to be other than what they're trying to tell us. And how can we waiver things on a plan a definitive plan, when we rarely can even see what's going on here?
Right. So we have a choice. The other choice we have that I'm trying to is we could continue this matter, even the consideration of the preliminary plan, and get more information, even just to give the approval for the preliminary plan. That's another option that we have.
Catherine, this is Art.
Yes, Arthur.
I would be open to what Ali had stated, and it's almost in line with what Bob is going. I mean, we can approve this plan, but underneath the condition at this point, there's no waivers that we can grant or consider, only because there's a lack of information to make a good determination on it. So that means if they're going to come in with a definitive, with unresolved waivers on anything, they may have to come in a plan that shows all of the full definitive plan with, meeting all the requirements. And I go along with what Tom Temple is saying and some of the other board members. I think it's the burden on the waivers needs to be put on the applicant. If there's a waiver request, be very clear. This is what the requirements say. This is the waiver. Here's the reasoning behind it. So, and that could be in a narrative state so that we could make a determination on whether that is sufficient reason to grant the waiver. I really am not sure why we would be granting some of these waivers, because they're not clear to me about why do we even want to consider them. Underground utilities, I wouldn't see a reason why we would want to grant anything on that. That they should put them in, period. All right. So, I think that if we take that approach, move on from this and say there's no waivers that we're considering at this point, then we could consider something. But other than that, you may have to do what Bob's saying.
Yes, a site visit might be called for, but perhaps we could do that in the context of the definitive subdivision plan. And I'm just saying, this evening we would have a choice either to continue this matter to get more information, or we could vote to approve with modifications, the modification being very simply stated that at this point no waivers are being considered by the planning board.
Catherine, Tom Gagan.
Yes, Tom, go ahead.
Catherine, I think what you just said makes sense, and I think we're all kind of beating around the same bush.
Yeah.
This board doesn't want to commit or appear to commit to that which we don't feel comfortable with in detail. My suggestion would be, if the applicant would apply for, and this board may grant, an extension, so that the work requested by Bob Dubus to give us a more visual aspect of what's being laid out, where and when, and then that be brought before the board as a preliminary. We would then have a better understanding of what we wish to grant or not grant. So again, my suggestion would be, and I'd be willing to make a motion to that effect, if the applicant wishes to ask for an extension to get some of this work done in the layout.
So in other words, this is Catherine speaking. So Tom Gagan, in other words, you're suggesting that we continue the matter even for the preliminary subdivision approval to get more information. Is that what you're suggesting?
Catherine, Tom Gagan, I think that's the fairest approach to all parties, including the board, is that we don't really want to say no and we can't say yes. We've, as I said, beaten around the bush of trying to make a determination that doesn't tie the hands of the board and doesn't encourage the applicant that certain things are going to happen and actions on the part of the board that haven't been defined. So
Yes.
I would suggest and certainly ask the applicant if they would request an extension. And as I said, I'd be happy to make a motion to extend while additional work be done in the road layout, including trees, and as Bob Dubus has pointed out, showing us where the utility lines turn out staked out so we can get a visual on a site plan, a site review, and perhaps the board itself, part of that extension would be to do a site walk prior to the opening of any extension to the preliminary.
Okay. This is, yes, may I ask who, could you
Warren.
identify yourself? Is this Warren?
Yes, it is, Warren Chain.
Please go ahead.
At the start of the meeting, I think Chad asked to be read into the record what the requirements are to submit a preliminary site plan for approval. And there's not much in there that has any detail, pencil drawings and so on. I don't, I've read through that a couple of times previously. But clearly, I would love to have more detail on the plan as we have seen it. I'd love to have more detail on many of the items which we have raised here. But I don't think, according to the requirements for a site plan approval, that any of that detail needs to be included. I think Dad has done a very good job of trying to include what is required. I think this board has done a very good job of signaling the concerns, the issues that we have with respect to those requirements, and therefore what we expect when we see a more definitive plan. Whether or not that's accomplished by having a continuation, in which case then there is a, let's call it a draft formal proposal that can be discussed, or whether they just come in, given the concerns that we have raised, with a plan that they believe addresses all of those issues in sufficient time for us to go do a walkthrough, et cetera, et cetera. But given that there's nothing in the requirements here to approve a preliminary plan that has any of the detail that we would want to see before we approve any of the exceptions, I'm perfectly comfortable to go ahead with approving the proposal of the preliminary plan, recognizing that the issues have been raised. And if they're not addressed in the formal proposal, then it won't get approved. And so it's up to the applicant to make sure this board's concerns in the areas already raised are addressed in a formal proposal. But the idea of trying to wordsmith something that says we're going to not approve something unless, or if we're going to improve it, but only if, that sort of thing, I think is difficult to wordsmith, but also unnecessary given the wording of what's needed for a preliminary proposal to be approved. So that's just my comment.
Thank you, Warren. This is Catherine. And in response to your comment, I think something, and we've been discussing it, something that's actually not clear is this preliminary subdivision plan being submitted to us with the waivers in place? because if that is the case, I think we would, if we would vote tonight to approve this preliminary subdivision plan, we would need to vote to approve it with modifications, stating that at this point, the waivers are not being considered or granted by the planning board. So I think that is a bit of perhaps the confusion, that it's not even clear if this preliminary plan is being submitted to us with the assumption that there are waivers. And Ally, I'm just wondering, could you comment on that?
I mean, this is Ally. The
Yes.
plan was submitted with notes, and also in your cover letter that did ask for certain waivers,
Yes.
depending on if they were able to get easements or not. So I do think that, you know, as proposed, it does discuss waivers.
Yes.
You know, I support, and if the board feels comfortable continuing and the applicant feels comfortable continuing until the July 27th meeting, where at what time the applicant, you know, before that meeting can submit a detailed list of waivers to us, so we feel more comfortable. And if the applicant's willing to stake where the road, you know, the pavement and then also the right of way would be, that could be helpful as well. But again, it's up to the board.
Okay, and we would also want to do a site visit before the 27th meeting.
So I think that I'd have to check on that, but I think due to COVID, we would each individually have to go to the site. So I'm not sure if it can be one site visit with all the board members. It would have to be individual.
All right.
If I may, we have had site visits. This is Thad Aldridge again. We have had site visits with the Conservation Commission since COVID, so it is possible.
Okay.
We all masked up and we all stayed 6 feet apart.
Okay. So this is Catherine speaking. I would support that course of action. It seems that even prior to giving a vote at the preliminary level, we need to have more clarity about the waivers, whether or not they're actually being requested and what exactly they are. And so what I would propose is that we take a vote to continue this matter to the 27th, and that we also try to arrange to gain more information, even at the level of the preliminary subdivision review, and that we also arrange a site visit. So,
Catherine, Tom Gagan?
yes, Tom Gagan, please go ahead.
I have no objections to what the board is talking about, a continuation, but I think as a courtesy to the applicant, we should ask for some input from them, as to whether they're willing to do that or not. There's no sense in us continuing if the applicant is not in favor, or there isn't enough time for that to actually do the work prior to that next meeting. So is it possible to get some input from Thad and the applicant, please?
This is Catherine. Yes, so we want to talk about the timing, whether it would be continued to the next meeting, which is July 27th. So Thad, do you have a comment on that?
Sure, Thad Aldridge. We could certainly have a revised plan and some staking completed prior to that. And that would be having everything done within a week to get it to you a week before that meeting.
All right.
I would just ask the board, and one of the main reasons we weren't very clear on the road width, for example, it's a question of what would the board accept. I've heard anything from 12 to 18 feet, and that's a great range.
Yes, Thad, this is Catherine, and I think, you know, it's sort of, maybe if I could use a light phrase, it's a little bit like the chicken and the egg. The reason it's not clear is because the board hasn't taken a formal vote, and the reason we haven't taken, and then you'd know for sure what the majority of the board was supporting. But part of the reason we're not taking a formal vote is because it's not completely clear to us exactly what you're requesting and what we can vote on. So I think that's the issue. And then given that you might be requesting certain things, certain waivers, I think what I'm hearing from the board is that we need more information, even at the preliminary subdivision plan review, even prior to the definitive, we even need more information even to give you our approval or approval with conditions for that. So that's what I'm hearing from the board. So I think
Catherine,
yes, this is Bob.
Yeah.
Which Bob? Wirtschafter?
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
I would hope in the future that you look to see who has their hand up, because I've been trying to talk for the last 20
Sorry,
minutes.
I'm sorry. You know, it doesn't show hands up on my
Okay.
version, so I do apologize. Please go ahead.
I would like to reassure the applicant that at the very least, I am accepting their waiver for the turnout because of the historic building reasoning. I believe the rest of it, I'm in total agreement that we wait, but I do want to reassure them that at least that argument has gained acceptance from me if they can solve all the other issues.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And this is Catherine. I would also agree with that. The T turnaround, I would be in favor of that, but I think the other issues are unresolved.
Catherine, Tom Gagan.
Yes, please go ahead.
Catherine, I think to answer Thad's question about what width do you want me to stake out, I think would make more sense from our next meeting that he stake out an 18-foot wide roadway. And then when we see that at a site plan, we could see if that's adequate or could it be reduced. But I know he has an issue of staking out 12, 14, 18 feet. But why don't we just pick a number of 18 feet and say from that perspective, when we're there, we can kind of view whether that seems adequate or not.
Yes. Yes, I think we would want to look at the 18-foot road width, and we want to see the we want to see what the required widths will be. We want those staked out. And then if they're going to ask for a waiver, you know, from those required width, the 30-foot, 33-foot right of way, etc., then we would want to see where they're proposing to put the boundaries. But I would agree to stake out the 18-foot width. So, but I think at this point, just for the sake of moving along, I'm hearing that the board is inclined to vote to continue this matter, to get more information and more clear information, and also to do a site visit. So, and I'm also hearing that the applicant is agreeing that continuing this matter to the 27th will be workable. Is that correct, Thad and Jamie?
Yes, Thad Eldridge here. We'll send the waiver letter in later this week.
All right. So then we should take a formal vote as a board to continue this matter to the July 27th meeting. So may I have a motion to that effect?
Bob Dubus, I make the motion to continue the meeting to the 27th.
Okay.
And Art Sprue, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. So let's do a roll call vote of the board. Tom Gagan.
I accept that.
Art Sprue. Art Sprue.
Oh, excuse me. Art Sprue, I accept that.
All right. Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, accept it.
Bob Wirtschafter.
Chapter accepted.
Warren Chang.
Warren Chang, I approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I approve that we continue this matter until the July 27th meeting. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Mr.
Bob Dubus.
Dubus.
Do we have to vote on a site?
On a site
walk or not?
visit. Ally, do we need to take a formal vote on a site visit?
I don't believe you do unless you want to be very clear about it, but I will take that on and set that up with everyone.
Yeah,
Bob
I
Dumas,
don't,
I just wanted to make sure we were doing things the right way. I didn't know, sorry.
thank you. Yeah, I don't remember us ever having to take a formal vote, but I think it's clear that the board would like to arrange that. So that would be great. All right, the next item on our agenda is a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals that's been requested regarding a driveway in a conservancy district. And this is regarding 159 Sea Pine Road. Do I have anyone representing this matter? An agent
Madam
here?
Chair, this is Bill Riley on behalf of David Hall.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Riley.
Well, if you put the plan up, this is an existing driveway. We're just resurfacing it. There's no significant change in grade.
All right. And will it be, it's non-pervious? Is that
That's
correct?
correct. Yes.
Yes. Okay. And it provides for the unobstructed flow of water.
Yes.
All right. And it's the existing driveway, but as I understand, a new house is being built. The old house is being demolished. New house is being built, but the existing driveway is staying there. Is there any expansion of the existing driveway?
Very slightly. If you look at the site plan, you can see there's a parking pad being created behind a retaining wall.
Okay.
On the side of the house for additional parking.
All right.
The only
yes.
significant change.
So I'll just ask the board if there's any questions for Mr. Riley or any comments. Otherwise, I think we could move to a vote to give a
Catherine,
positive recommendation. Yes, Arthur. Sure.
Just a clarification, when I looked at the plan, which is a very small plan, I noticed that it says the existing driveway is paved. Is it paved, and are they proposing to actually to remove the pavement and put in a pervious driveway like a gravel or shell or whatever? I'm not clear on that part.
No, perhaps I misspoke. I think the existing driveway is going to remain as it is. We don't have the engineer is not with me, so I really don't know the full answer, but I think that one of the things to point out, and it says it's in a conservancy district, the reality is that the conservancy district elevation in this area is 12. Or it's 12. And so the only part of the driveway that's actually in the conservancy district is if you see the 12 elevation across the driveway, right where that additional parking pad's going to be. A little further south, Allie. Your little hand. Come down, keep coming. Oh, right there. There. See that 12? Okay. So, and in front of the garage is 12-1 because you have to ramp up to the garage because the garage is above the floodplain. So the only part that's below the floodplain elevation is that section from that number 12 out to the northernmost end of the driveway. So it's a very limited area. So, and it's been that way for a very long time. So, we don't anticipate any interference with the, floodwaters. And if the floodwaters actually reach elevation 12, which has never happened in this location, the water would all go down into this swale. If you move the plane up a little higher, Allie, you can see go the other way. Move south. There you go, right there. So you see, if you look at the grades, you have this swale in the front of the house. So everything's graded towards the swale. So if there were to be a storm surge that actually reached the 100-year flood elevation, it would really fill in this area in front of the house. The driveway is graded in that direction, so any water there would run off into that swale as well. So we don't think there's anything, anything that's going to interfere with the passage of floodwaters in this area.
So this is Catherine, Mr. Riley. So what you're proposing is that the existing paved driveway remains, and that goes, again, if we can look on the plan, it goes all the way north up to the house. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's outside from the number 12 to Sea Pine is not in the Conservancy District.
So from number 12 going south to Sea Pine is not in Conservancy. So it's just north of that 12 is in Conservancy, but that area to the west of the house is all paved right now. Is that correct? It's not pervious material. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's not as large as is shown on this plan because we have this parking pad in the front here is proposed, does not exist right now.
Which parking pad is that? Is that to the north?
Move the hand further south to the number 12 again, Ally. Yeah, that parking pad right there.
That doesn't exist. Okay. So the additions will be of pervious material, or will they also be paved?
That will also be paved.
So in general, when we're approving driveways in the Conservancy District, which everything north of 12 is, we ask that they're constructed of permeable material. So, yes.
I know. I'm familiar with that.
Yes. So.
But the reason for your review is to make sure that nothing is done that's going to interfere with the passage of floodwaters over the driveway.
Right, but we also require the permeable material. There's 2 points. So I don't really know how we can proceed on this.
Well, you're making a recommendation to the zoning board, so you'll have to make your recommendation.
Since it's all paved, and the additions will also be paved. So you're talking about non-permeable paved additions to a paved area in the Conservancy District, but that nonetheless will allow for the unobstructed flow of water. Is that correct? All right.
Right.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Riley from the board?
This is Bob Dubus. I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, Mr. Dubus, please go ahead.
Bill, this house is not even constructed yet, correct?
There's a house there, but what we're proposing is not yet constructed. We haven't been to the zoning board yet.
So you're going to take the existing house down and put a new house there.
That's correct.
And you don't think that the old driveway with all the trucks and everything going by is not going to get ruined?
We're going to use
what I'm saying is that when you pave, you're going to
use F-150s, Bob.
You're going to pave a whole brand new driveway.
I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know.
You're certainly not going to add on and add on and add on to the driveway without overlaying the whole thing. So you're going to construct a brand new paved driveway, which is in the 100-foot coastal bank and the 50-foot coastal bank from the wetland. So I have reservations on that part.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Dubus.
Madam Chairman, this is Warren Chain.
Yes, Warren, please go ahead.
I have reservations as well. It seems to me, having gone through an addition on my house, things get all torn up, and that's likely to be replaced. So I see no reason why it couldn't be replaced with what is in accordance with Conservation Commission rules and our guidance. I do have a question for Ally.
In the first place, that was on Conservation Commission rules. There's no rule that prohibits asphalt driveways in a conservancy district.
No, absolutely right. Refer to the guidance that we have been given with respect to what we do. But Ali, the materials that we were sent with respect to this driveway explicitly says the driveway shall be constructed of a permeable material.
Yes.
So Warren, this is Allie. The way I read the plan right here, it says proposed driveway gravel shell. So that's the way I read it, that they were proposed to create this driveway of gravel shell. This says existing paved drive, so that's what's existing there. But whenever I look at plans, I look at what's proposed, and that's what I look as. It says it right here. But I am, again, not the engineer, survey, or agent, but that is how I read it.
All right.
Allie, I believe that there's a small section down there that's going to be gravel or shell.
Right.
Well,
This is Catherine's.
I don't have Dave Clark with me. I mean, you know, you know, if you scroll up a little bit or move south, Alley. I mean, yeah, go the other way towards Sea Pine. I mean, there's a lot of room for arrows there that would say, you know, paved drive to be removed and replaced with gravel or shell. Yeah, but they only have it at the very northern end. So I don't want to represent that the whole thing's going to be gravel or shell without having clear information on the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. This is Catherine speaking. This is a very, central point. We do need to know, and I think the points brought up by Mr. Dubus and Mr. Chain are really important, that what we're looking at, what we think we're looking at, is putting in a completely new paved driveway. And at this point, our particular requirements do require that the driveway be of permeable material and be constructed so as to not obstruct the flow of water. So at this point, given the information that we have, let me finish. I think I'm sorry, let me finish. I think it would not be possible for us to give a positive recommendation. We would need clarification, definitely. Mr. Riley, did you want to say something?
Only that the difference between a gravel driveway and a paved driveway regarding the obstruction of floodwaters is non-existent. There is no difference. What you're talking about is theoretically having some of the stormwater percolate down into the groundwater. And the reality is that the way this driveway is designed, and with that huge swale in the front of the property, if there is any water that's going to percolate down, it's going to go in through the swale in the front of the property. The reality of a driveway, which I'm sure Bob Dubus knows well, is that if you put down a gravel shell driveway, in 5 years, it's as solid as if it were asphalt. So, but it's talking about obstructing the flow of stormwater, and there's no difference between gravel and asphalt in terms of obstructing the flow. The water will flow across the driveway and down into the drain, or will recede with the tide back out into Crow's Pond. I understand you're going to make your recommendation, and that'll go to the zoning board, and we'll deal with it.
Yeah. Again, if I could clarify, this is Catherine speaking. As I understand the point, it's 2 points. Not that the permeable material will allow for the unobstructed flow of water, but that the driveway has to be constructed to allow for the unobstructed flow of water, and it must be of a permeable material. So it's not necessarily a cause and effect. But so this, again, this is Catherine. What I'm going to ask you is when you're obviously asking for this recommendation because the applicant has a meeting with the Zoning Board of Appeals on July 23rd. And at this point, I think it's clear, but of course we'll take a formal vote, but it's clear that what's the information that we have, it actually does not meet our requirements. So we couldn't give a positive recommendation. I have to confess, I made this same assumptions that Ally did when I read the plan, and I saw a proposed driveway gravel shell. So I had understood that the new driveway was going to be put in exactly where the existing driveway is, but that it was going to be of a permeable material. So we can go ahead and take a formal vote tonight on the recommendation. Yes.
Madam Chair, I'll check with David Clark in the morning, and I'll send Ally an email first thing in the morning to let her know if the little proposed driveway gravel / shell applies to the whole driveway or just to the portion where the wording is.
So if it's that big of a clarification that we're waiting for, again, it would be difficult for us to vote on it tonight.
Madam Chair,
yes.
Please just make your recommendation to the zoning board, and we'll deal with it there. I will let Ally know tomorrow, just so that she can pass on to the board members which, if I was correct in saying it's going to be paved, or if the assumption by the note on the plan is going to be correct. I mean, just for information purposes.
It's a little more than information. I think it's a central point regarding our vote.
I understand that, and your vote is a recommendation to the zoning board.
Right.
Okay, so
yes,
they'll get your recommendation, and if they adopt your recommendation, then they can say to us, make the driveway pervious.
Can I
yes.
Make a motion that says we approve the plan contingent on the driveway being a permeable surface, and that we can. I mean, otherwise we could grant this, but I'm not going to vote for it if it might be impervious. I will vote for it if it is impervious.
Yes.
So I think I would like to, a motion that says we approve the site plan with the provision that the driveway is pervious material, satisfies everything we can do for this project.
I second that motion, Tom Gagan.
Madam Chairman, Bob Dubus here. I have one thing I'd like to add to that before we vote on it. That is only pervious material within the 100-foot setback. From the 100-foot out, it can be asphalt, because there's a rise on there, and it probably would be better to have asphalt going up the rise.
All right.
That's fine. I accept that amended.
Right. But what we're voting on is that we would give a positive recommendation, provided that the new driveway would be constructed entirely of pervious material. And Bob, how would you would say north of the 100-foot setback?
Yes.
All right. So
Yeah,
that's how
that's the Conservancy District, isn't that right, Catherine?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so that's how we would word the vote. And I have a motion and a second. So let's do a roll call vote. So we're voting that we would give this a positive recommendation, provided that the new driveway is constructed entirely of pervious material north of the 100-foot setback, correct? So and that's the motion on the floor. So let's do a roll call vote. Tom Gagan,
I would approve of that motion.
thank you. Art Spru,
Art Spru, I approve of that motion.
Bob Dubus,
Bob Dubus, I approve of that.
Bob Wertschafter,
I approve Bob Wertschafter.
and Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, I approve of that, yes.
And this is Catherine Halpern, and I approve of that recommendation. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair and the board members.
Thank you. All right. So the next item of business on our agenda is the reorganization of the board. And this is something, as most of you know, that we do every year in July. And we vote on who will be the clerk and the vice chair and the chair of the planning board for the next year. Are there any questions from anyone about the reorganization of the board? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and we'll take nominations for clerk.
Madam Chair, Tom
Yes,
Gagan.
Mr. Gagan, yes,
I would like to read a statement, please.
sure. Please go ahead.
Thank you. The statement reads as follows. As in the past, I am concerned about term limits for all appointed and elected public officials. I am not, as President Johnson once stated, that would be Lyndon Johnson, not Andrew Johnson. I'm not that old. That I would neither run for office or accept my board's nomination for any additional administrative position. Having served as vice chair for several years, it is time to allow another board member to step into this position. We have the good fortune to have very capable board of hardworking citizens who do their homework by reading and understanding that which comes before the board for consideration. They take the time to site visit projects and openly contribute to any public concerns associated thereto. New leadership is refreshing and should always be encouraged by this board and all members of boards and committees serving in the town of Chatham. I enthusiastically endorse new officers for the planning board to serve wisely and with diligence. All of the board members are capable individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gagan. All right. Any other comments from the board or questions from the board before we proceed with nominations? And we can start with nominations for clerk. Do I have a nomination for clerk?
I nominate the new gentleman, Mr. Griffith. Isn't it our tradition to make him the clerk?
That is our tradition. I'm just going to refer to Ali here since there's still some, we still need to swear Mr. Griffin in. And so is it possible to vote him in as clerk, Ali, prior to that point?
That is a great question. He is not yet sworn in, so just to be safe, I would not include him in your deliberation at the moment. So that's my recommendation.
Yes.
It's not a move. I ask that we postpone that vote till the next meeting.
Postpone the vote.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think we can do that. So we'll postpone our vote for clerk. There does seem to be some feedback. Can everyone mute their phones? So we can postpone the vote for clerk till the meeting on July 27th, and we'll anticipate that Roger will be sworn in at that time, and that we could consider him. So now we could move to vice chair. And Mr. Gagan, do I understand from your statement that you do not want to be considered for vice chair?
That is correct.
All right, thank you very much. So do I have any nominations for vice chair?
Can I ask, it's Bob Wertschafter again, can I ask a question? Are you willing to be nominated again as the chair, or do we actually be looking for two new people?
This is Catherine speaking. I'm willing to be nominated again as chair.
Okay, thank you. That simplifies it somewhat.
Thank you. So I'll ask again.
I will
if-
throw my name in for nomination for vice chair, Catherine.
All right, very good.
Art Sprue, yeah.
Art Sprue. So we have a nomination for vice chair, Art Sprue.
I don't know if I can nominate myself, but I would throw my name in consideration.
All right.
Nominate Art Sprue, this is Bob Ward chapter. I nominate Art Sprue for vice chair.
Okay. Thank you. So we do have a nomination for vice chair. So if there are no other nominations, we could vote on Art Sprue being our new vice chairperson. So do I have a motion?
This is Warren Chain. I so move.
And do I have a second to that motion?
Tom Gagan, second.
So let's do a roll call vote. Tom Gagan,
I vote in favor of Arthur Sprue being vice chair.
and Arthur Sprue. You can vote for yourself. It's all right.
I'll vote in favor of it since I nominated myself.
All right. And Mr. Dubus
I approve of the nomination.
and Bob Wertschafter
Bob Ward chapter approves.
and Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, I approve.
And this is Catherine Halper, and I also approve. And I'll actually ask Ally to ask for nominations for chair.
This is Ally. Are there any nominations for chair?
I nominate this Bob Ward chapter. I nominate Catherine Halpern for chair.
Is there a second?
Art
Warren
Sprue, I
Chain,
can second
second.
that.
Okay, Art, I'll do a roll call.
Can I make one comment? I think it's very commendable that that Catherine wants to continue this, only because virtual meetings are a challenge. And I think she's been doing a marvelous job on this because I don't think I could handle anywhere near what she is doing. So I do need to commend her on her patience with applicants, public and the board members. So I'm all in favor of this.
Okay, I'm going to go through a roll call. Tom Gagan.
I abstain.
Okay. Bob Wertschafter.
I approve.
Bob Dubus.
I approve.
Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, I approve.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, I approve.
And this is Catherine.
Congratulations.
Do I vote for myself?
I think you can.
Okay, I approve. Thank you.
Congratulations, Catherine.
Thank you. And congratulations, Art. And we'll also look forward to nominating our new member on the 27th for clerk. So thank you all. Then our last item on the agenda is just comments. I do want to mention to the board that Ally's been terrific in continuing to follow up on our long-range planning activities. During the COVID situation, as a regulatory board, we've been asked to restrict our business to simply to regulatory matters. However, we've checked now with town manager and everyone involved, and we are able to put some of our time now to continue to research form-based code as something that we can use for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning. And Ally's been great about following up with Cape Cod Commission. And at this point, we do have a meeting as that will be an introduction to form-based code. And the Cape Cod Commission will meet with us on July 27th. So we can begin that consideration again. And Ally, were there any additional points that you'd like to add for the board?
I just wanted to ask a question because we did continue that last application to the 27th. The form-based code presentation might take a little time. So I was just hoping that maybe we could start the meeting a little early, maybe at 4, unless you guys, can. I know Bob Dubus sometimes has a problem with that.
Okay, so we could poll the board. Tom Gagan, could you come on July 27th at 4?
I actually think that Tom has been disconnected.
Oh dear. Okay. So let's get him connected.
Just to make it simple, I cannot make that time.
You cannot make that time. Okay. So maybe we'll need to stick with 5. I think we would want to include everybody.
Yep, no, I agree. We'll stick with 5 then.
So we'll stick with 5. So 5 o'clock, July 27th. We do have to consider the subdivision plan that we continued, but we will also have the presentation with Cape Cod Commission on form-based code. And as I understand from Ali, this will be more of a introduction for us to form-based code. Some board members attended a seminar on form-based code a few months ago, but not everyone was able to attend. So this will be more of an introduction to form-based code, but I think also they'll probably touch upon how we could potentially use it to structure our West Chatham zoning.
Yeah.
And is there something in advance too that they wanted to ask us, Ali?
Yeah, so if I could just go into it a little bit more.
Sure.
As the board knows, we did receive a DLTA grant, which allowed us to contract with the Cape Cod Commission to help us do public outreach and then also craft the form-based code bylaw for West Chatham. And just so the board, a little feedback or refresher for the board on form-based code is that basically it regulates not so much the uses, although it does, but it regulates what the form of the buildings will look like. So we'll be able to dictate kind of upfront what we want the character of that area to look like, which will help us. I think that's what the board was looking to do when we were having these discussions originally on the West Chatham area. And so the Cape Cod Commission will be coming on the 27th to give kind of just an update about what form-based code is, to give everyone a refresher, and then talk about our path going forward, about how we'll engage with public input. And so that's kind of the agenda for those meetings.
Ali, this is Warren Chain. Just a question. Just to confirm, the consultant from the Cape Cod Commission has yet to really do any substantive work with respect to drafting a form-based zoning for West Chatham, correct?
Yes, that is completely correct. We were kind of on hold, unfortunately, because of the COVID emergency. But now we're able to put some more time into this and really kind of get started. And we are looking towards the board for all of your input on what we think would be, good there. And then also the residents of the West Chatham neighborhood center, and then also the community, obviously at large, because it will have to go to town meeting before we even, get to drafting a bylaw. So that's the goal. And we were discussing, I was discussing with some members of the commission, and we thought it would be helpful and I'll send out an email about this, but we thought it would be helpful if the board could send in some pictures to me, hopefully by the end of next week or this week, regarding what kind of buildings that they think are, you think are good and would work really well in that West Chatham neighborhood center, just to give us a basis to start off with. But we're obviously going to, collect input and also other, photos from people who live in that actual and work in that neighborhood, and also the town at large. So.
Okay, good. Ali, this is Catherine. Could I ask you, if we don't have photos, could we send you the name of the building or the address, as an example?
Yeah, that's fine. I can do screenshots of the buildings.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds great. All right. Any other discussion about our July 27th meeting and form-based code before we move to adjourn pretty soon? So before we adjourn, I'm sorry, who's that?
Davis, move to adjourn.
Warren
All
Chain,
right. But
second.
I should just ask, this is Catherine, before we act on that, I should just ask if there's any member of the public who has not had the opportunity to speak on any matter that we've discussed this evening, just before we close. All right, there being none, we have a motion to adjourn and a second, so let's do a roll call vote. Has Tom Gagan been reconnected?
He has
I-
not.
He has not, all right. Art Spru,
Approved. Arts approved.
Bob Dubus,
Bob Dubus approves.
Bob Wirtschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter approved.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approved.
and this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve that we adjourn, and the time is 7:16 in the evening. Thank you all for your participation.